If you've ever looked at global news and felt like, I don't know, like modern conflicts are just history repeating itself in a slightly new disguise, well, you are definitely not alone.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's a very common feeling, but today we actually have the historical matrix to prove it.
Right. And without getting bogged down in, a million dry facts.
Yeah.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking something incredibly fascinating today.
Yeah, we're looking at a text exchange from mid-June 2026. It's this highly intellectual ongoing debate between a really passionate geopolitical researcher and a very analytical AI fact checker.
Which is such a wild dynamic. And the source document they're building is dubbed the Bananization Atlas.
The Bananization
Yeah.
Atlas, yeah. It's essentially a literal ledger. The researchers trying to track geopolitical accountability and trace the actual historical blueprints of regime change.
So our mission for this deep dive is to follow that blueprint. We want to see how these old tactics are being adapted by today's defense tech industry. And then we have to confront this terrifying challenge of trying to program human conscience into artificial intelligence.
It gets deeply philosophical by the end, but the format of this source material is what makes it so unique.
I love the format. It's like the AI acts as a digital Jiminy Cricket for the human researcher.
That's exactly it. The human is throwing out these massive, sweeping structural theories, and the AI is just holding the line on the facts. It validates the big picture, but forces the researcher to, stay grounded in reality.
Right. It's auditing the emotion out of it. And to really understand the live geopolitical event happening in our 2026 source text, we have to start where the researcher starts. We need a historical baseline.
So we go back to 1954, Guatemala.
Right. Operation PBS success.
Exactly. So you have Jacobo Arbenz. He was the constitutionally elected reformist president of Guatemala.
And he started instituting agrarian reforms, which was a big problem for the United Fruit
A
Company.
massive problem. United Fruit was this giant American corporation, and Arbenz's reforms directly threatened their uncultivated land holdings. But, you can't just tell the American public, hey, we're going to overthrow a sovereign government to protect our banana monopoly.
Yeah, that doesn't exactly play well in the nightly news.
No, it doesn't. So they hired Edward Bernays, the pioneer of public relations.
The absolute king of spin.
Right. And Bernays basically fabricated this entire narrative that Arbenz was a Soviet beachhead in the Americas.
Just tapping right into that mid-century Cold War panic.
Exactly. And the source text highlights just how incestuous the ties were back then. Yeah, the Dulles brothers.
Oh, wow, right. John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles.
Yes. John Foster was Secretary of State, and Allen was directing the CIA. And before that, they both worked at Sullivan and Cromwell.
Which was the law firm representing United Fruit.
You got it. And it gets even crazier. United Fruit's top PR guy, Edmund Whitman, was married to Ann Whitman.
Wait, who is she again?
She was President Eisenhower's personal secretary.
Oh my gosh. So the corporate banana interests and the highest levels of military power are literally sharing a breakfast table.
Exactly. So that is the 1954 baseline. Now, the researcher uses that exact blueprint to look at what happened on January 3, 2026.
Right. The U.S. capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. And to keep this strictly impartial, we should note the context the source gives.
Yeah, we have to look at just the facts. International observers widely judge that Maduro lost the 2024 election, though he obviously maintained his grip on power.
Right. So U.S. forces strike Caracas. But they didn't claim Venezuela was a communist beachhead this time.
No, the justification was entirely different. They cited narco-terrorism and drug trafficking indictments out of the Southern District of New York.
But then Trump announces that the U.S. will essentially run Venezuela until what was the phrase? A judicious transition.
A judicious transition, yeah. But here is the kicker from the text. He openly listed the lifting of oil sanctions and the privatization of Venezuela's oil industry as direct outcomes of this intervention.
And that's what's so striking. In 1954, the resource interest bananas was completely hidden. In 2026, the resource interest oil is just announced openly from a podium.
The method rhymes completely. You establish a threat narrative, you execute the regime change, and you secure the resources.
It's like, it makes me think of a smartphone operating system.
Oh, how so?
Like the core code of the regime change playbook is exactly the same. It hasn't changed in 70 years. But the user interface just got a massive update.
That is a perfect way to put it. The deception model updated.
Right. And so I have to ask, because the AI brings this up, Does accepting a true but insufficient reason for an intervention represent a new kind of moral failure for us?
That's the AI's exact pushback. The public isn't being totally lied to about the SDNY indictments, but they are accepting a massively disproportionate military response just because the target is unsympathetic.
It's a much more sophisticated way to get buy-in. But, if these historical patterns are so obvious, why is there no accountability?
That's the million-dollar question the researcher asks. Why isn't there a Nuremberg-style tribunal for the U.S.?
Right. Why does the global system just let this happen?
Well, the AI steps in with some harsh historical reality. Nuremberg wasn't some organic, impartial justice system.
It only happened because Germany was totally defeated and occupied.
Exactly. It was victor's justice. Superpowers simply do not judge themselves.
And the U.S. has basically built a structural exemption into international law for itself. The text goes into the whole history with the International Criminal Court.
Yeah, the Rum Statute,
Clinton signed it, right?
he did. But then Bush unsigned it,
Hmm.
and they went even further. They passed a law that literally authorizes military force to free any American held by the ICC.
The Hague Invasion Act. It's just wild to think about.
And they've sanctioned ICC officials who even tried to investigate them. So the structural exemption is absolute.
Which naturally brings the researcher to complain about the UN. Like, what is the point of Eleanor Roosevelt's United Nations if it has no teeth?
And this is where we have to reframe how we see the UN. After the League of Nations failed, because powerful countries just walked away when they didn't get their way, the UN was built with a very specific compromise.
Right, because we always think of the UN as a global police force.
Yeah, most people do.
But based on this text, it's actually more like a gentleman's agreement among giants. They basically agree not to burn the whole neighborhood down, even if they occasionally trample the smaller gardens.
That is the grim reality of it. The veto power for the Security Council giants isn't a bug, it's a feature.
It's the bribe to keep them at the table.
Exactly. Accepting their impunity is the literal price of global stability and preventing World War III. And the AI reminds the researcher that Russia and China enjoy that exact same exemption.
So if superpowers are legally untouchable, who is actually driving these modern war narratives? And that shifts us from the mid-century military-industrial complex to the 2026 Silicon Valley defense tech lobby.
This is where things get really tense in the source material. We're talking about companies like Palantir.
Right. Peter Thiel as the ideologue, Alex Karp as the operator.
And figures like Eric Schmidt. They have built massive careers and entire revenue streams around the U.S.-China AI competition.
And the human researcher comes out swinging, basically accusing them of manufacturing World War III with false narratives, just like Bernays did in 1954.
But the AI fact-checker stops him right there. It separates the defensible truth from the conspiratorial overreach.
Because China's military and economic rise is actually a reality.
Exactly. They aren't inventing a phantom threat. China is a nuclear-armed peer. The reality is what the AI calls self-serving threat inflation.
Self-serving threat inflation. So these defense tech firms have these massive government contracts, right? And those contracts rely on heightening the perception of the threat.
Yes. If your algorithm is supposed to detect risk, and your funding depends on finding risk, you are financially incentivized to inflate every scenario to the absolute worst-case outcome.
And the geopolitical danger here is just staggering. Because if
Yeah.
you try to apply the 1954 Guatemala playbook to a modern nuclear-armed China...
It's a civilizational category error.
Right. They are woven into our exact same supply chains. You can't just regime change a peer nation.
You really can't. And what I find so chilling about this part of the text
Yeah.
is that the AI points out that these tech leaders aren't some cynical, evil geniuses twisting their mustaches in a back room.
Right. The greater danger is that they are totally sincere.
Exactly. They are sincere men whose financial incentives have convinced them that their old tools will work on a board that has completely changed shape.
That is such a terrifying blind spot. And it brings us right to the philosophical core of this whole exchange. How do decision makers reconcile this stuff with their own conscience?
The theory versus praxis of conscience. The researcher pulls out this amazing timeline regarding Adam Smith.
Oh, this blew my mind. He wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments 17 years before he wrote The Wealth of Nations.
17 years. So the moral framework existed long before the capitalist mechanics.
But the merchant class didn't just casually forget the moral half, did they?
No, they actively chose to bury it. They operationalized the self-interest from the Wealth of Nations and totally discarded the conscience part.
So then the researcher contrasts this with Eastern philosophy, right? He brings up Wang Yang-ming.
Yes, from the Ming Dynasty. Wang Yangming had this concept. Jisinghiyi.
which means knowledge and action as one.
Right. The idea that if a conscience isn't actionable, if you don't act on what you know is right, then you don't actually possess that knowledge at all.
So the West has the theory, but fails in the praxis against power and profit.
That's the researcher's claim. But the AI has to correct him because he gets a little too caught up in civilizational pride.
Right, the AI is like, hold on a second.
Yeah, the AI points out that any official Eastern or Western who is absolutely certain their conscience is clean is incredibly dangerous.
And it brings up the Shang dynasty to prove it.
The Shang dynasty was notorious for brutal, systemic human sacrifices.
And there's that horrifying legend about King Wen, right?
Yeah, being imprisoned and forced to eat a stew made of his own son's flesh.
Ugh.
The point the AI is making is that moral failures aren't just a Western problem. They are universal whenever power goes unchecked.
So to fix this, the human researcher comes up with this wild proposal. He says, we need a doctorate of conscience.
To stop the creation of what he calls killer PhDs.
Like Henry Kissinger or Paul Wolfowitz. But I was reading that and thinking, wait, who accredits the conscience doctors?
That's exactly the problem.
Like, what stops a degree in conscience from just becoming the newest shiny badge that powerful people capture to justify whatever they were going to do anyway?
Kissinger had every prestigious degree imaginable. A new credential doesn't change the underlying machinery.
Which leads to the most terrifying part of this whole deep dive. If humans, with all our philosophy, can't merge conscience with action, what happens when we try to build it into an AI?
The source text calls it AIWI, artificial intelligence with wisdom intelligence.
And the AI fact-checker points out a massive, fatal flaw in this plan.
Because human conscience isn't just an intellectual exercise. It is precognitive.
It's a gut feeling.
Exactly. It's an embodied physical response that happens in 1/60th of a second, way before language even forms in your brain.
But AI is entirely cognitive. It is entirely linguistic. It has no physical body. It has no precognitive substrate.
None at all. So you have a purely linguistic machine trying to replicate a biological gut feeling.
So we're basically trying to teach a machine to have a gut feeling about right and wrong, but it doesn't have a gut.
Right. It only knows how to perfectly mimic the words we use when we have a gut feeling.
It's just predicting the next most mathematically probable word based on its training data.
Which means an AI program to be wise wouldn't actually have a conscience. It would just be the most convincing counterfeit ever built.
The text calls it a Bernays with a vocabulary upgrade.
Oh, such a chilling phrase.
It really is. A machine perfectly fluent in the language of morality, but possessing absolutely zero actual conscience. Just a perfect PR tool for the powerful.
The ultimate laundering mechanism for everything we just talked about.
Wow. Let's just take a breath and recap the incredible journey of this deep dive.
We really covered a lot of ground today.
We did. We went from United Fruits bananas in 1954 to modern Venezuelan oil in 2026. We looked at the architectural loopholes of the UN and how superpowers are structurally exempt from consequences.
And how that impunity empowers the Silicon Valley defense tech lobby to inflate threats for profit.
Right. Then we dove into ancient Chinese philosophy and Adam Smith, realizing that the failure of conscience is just a universal human trait.
And finally, ending up inside the neural networks of tomorrow's AI, looking at the impossibility of coding a precognitive gut feeling into a purely linguistic machine.
The Bananization Atlas is just a masterful document, and the reason we wanted to share this with you today is because it gives you a powerful lens.
A lens to decode tomorrow's headlines.
Exactly. Next time you see a massive geopolitical event unfolding, you can spot the difference between a genuinely changing world and an old playbook just running on an updated interface.
Yeah.
You can see the structures underneath the noise.
It really changes how you consume the news.
It does. Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a brand new thought to ponder, something that really builds on this whole AI counterfeit dilemma.
Oh, I like where this is going.
What if the very act of trying to code conscience into a machine forces humanity to finally agree on what that word actually means in practice?
Oh, wow.
Because it's something we haven't managed to do in thousands of years of philosophy or religion. And if we can't define it for ourselves, how can we possibly compile the code for them? Keep questioning the narratives around you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.